Tēnā koutou, nau mai, haere mai. Hello everyone, welcome to the Walking the Shadowlands podcast. Let me be your guide as we take a walk into the realms of the unexplained, of the paranormal, of things that go bump in the night and haunt your dreams.
Your hosts?
I'm Marianne. Thanks so much for joining me today, tonight, whatever time it is, wherever you're living in this beautiful world of ours. Sit back, relax. Let me be your guide as we walk into the Shadowlands together and see what awaits us there. Kia ora, hi everyone, welcome back. If this is your first time tuning into our podcast, thank you for joining us all. I hope you all had a great Halloween celebration if you celebrate that holiday. I'm not going to talk much before we get into conversation with my guest this episode. As always, are you willing to walk with me into this part of the Shadowlands and see what awaits us there? Then let's begin. Bruce Olav Solheim was born in 1958 in Seattle, Washington, to hard-working Norwegian immigrant parents. As born in Olav Solheim, Bruce was the first person in his family to go to college. He served for 6 years in the U.S. Army as a jail guard and later as a helicopter pilot. He earned his Ph.D. in history from the Bowling Green State University in 1993. He's a distinguished professor of history at Citrus College in Glendora, California. He also served as a Fulbright professor in 2003 at the University of Tromsø in northern Norway. He teaches a paranormal personal history course at Citrus College. Dr. Solheim is an associate member of the Parapsychological Association and a member of Zero and MUFON. He founded the Veterans Program at Citrus College and co-founded with Manuel Martinez and Ginger de Villarosa the Boots to Books Transition Course, the first college course in the United States designed specifically for recently returned veterans. He has published 8 books, 1 comic book, and has written 10 plays, 2 of which have been produced. Bruce is married to Ginger and has 4 wonderful children. He also has 2 precious grandsons. I'd like to welcome my guest today, Dr. Bruce Olav Solheim. Welcome, Bruce, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Marianne.
You're a professor currently, are you?
Yeah, I teach. I'm a tenured professor, a distinguished professor. My colleagues gave me that moniker several years ago, which I'm very proud of. So I've been teaching here at Citrus College for 23 years. Wow. And 30 years total teaching, but 23 years here in Southern California.
That's a long time to be in the education field, and you're still teaching. It doesn't stop, does it? Just teaching in different areas now. And I see that you used to be an aviator in the Army and a former defense contractor as well.
Yeah, I have some government experience. I spent 6 years in the U.S. Army. I was first a jail guard. I worked in West Germany when it was East and West Germany
Right.
during the Cold War. And then I went to flight school, became a warrant officer, and flew helicopters. And I was with the 82nd Airborne Division. So luckily, I was never in combat because I'm a very sensitive person. So I think I probably wouldn't have done well in combat.
Yeah.
At least not in the long, afterwards. I probably could have got through it at the time, but nobody knows. But came close several times. We were loaded up on the transport aircraft, ready to go. God knows where they were going to send us, but that's the way it was in the when I was with the 82nd Airborne. It was a rapid deployment force. So, and then I worked after the military. I worked for Boeing. For the military part of Boeing, I was on the B-1 bomber project, the B-2 bomber. I started briefly, and so yeah, I've worked in defense contracting, and then I've been teaching. Like I said, for 30 years, teaching history and political science, but mainly history now.
Wow, that's an interesting combination. I guess there is a bit of a crossover there, though, isn't there?
Yeah. I've had a great time. I love teaching in the classroom. Of course, the last year and a half we've been teaching online, and that'll continue probably through next year. It looks like we just had a big meeting today with our faculty union, and I think that's what's going to happen because of the Delta variant,
Right.
And all the precautions and so forth. And it looks like we're going to have mandatory vaccinations at the campus, and all kinds of things are going on. Not sure how it is there, where you're at, but that's what's going on here. A very serious situation. But I've had a lot of different experiences. I've also worked as a carpenter, so I've done a lot of different things in my life, but the main thing that I've enjoyed is teaching and writing. So I've been doing that. I've been writing since I was a little kid, and yeah.
Right, and you've got a few books published, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to publish 12 books.
Wow.
The last 4 have been in addition to my comic books too. I've published a couple of comic books, which are really one of the things I'm most proud of, is actually publishing a comic book. It's like a lifelong dream to do that since I was a little kid. But the last 4 books have been paranormal books, which have documented my paranormal experiences that I've had since I was about 4 years old, including ghosts and psychokinesis and telekinesis and angels and demons and aliens and cryptids and everything, all the paranormal stuff. I'm like a lightning rod for it. And so, that's what I've been doing recently. I teach a paranormal course. I haven't taught it during when we've been online, but hopefully when we go back to campus, then I will teach my paranormal course again. So it's very, very enjoyable. I enjoy teaching history in my day job, but in the night classes, the paranormal class was great. Really cool people. And they all have one thing in common, and that's they all want a safe place to talk about their experiences, because there's so many people who are, they just don't want to hear it, or they want to make fun of a person who's had experiences. And,
right.
and really that's what kept me silent until 2016.
Right.
My whole life, I had all these paranormal experiences, couldn't talk to anybody about it. Not in the military, not for Boeing in the defense contract world, not in academia either, because other academics are not, they're going to laugh at you. At least that's what I thought.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Actually, I was wrong. I was wrong about that. I've been accepted. At least if they're talking about me, they're doing it behind my back, because they haven't said anything to me in person.
Well, there's always those, aren't there? But that's really interesting that I want to go back to your paranormal class, and it's interesting that you point out that they want a place to talk about their experiences. And it's been my observation that most people who have, like you and myself, have grown up or have had paranormal experiences are more interested in finding out more, learning more. What sort of things did you cover in that class?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I first design the class. I had all these lectures planned out and what I was going to do. We would do experiments, and it was all very, like I would do a history class. I did history of the paranormal, and then let's talk about telekinesis, and let's do some kind of experiment. And what I found out is that what the students want, and you always have to listen to what the students want, because otherwise you're just up there, talking and people are tuned out. So what they wanted was to be able to tell me and tell the class and to be accepted about what has happened to them. And then, so I had to quickly figure that out and say, okay, the beginning of the class, everybody's going to share. And then whatever people talk about, those topics, I'll write them on the board. And then like if somebody had a ghost experience, then we'll talk about apparitions that night, or we'll talk about telekinesis, or we'll talk about, whatever that comes up, angels and demons, or, cryptids. And so then I'll focus that night's kind of mini lecture about those particular aspects of the paranormal. So it kind of, like you said, organically came about, and the students loved it. I taught it for almost 2 years, and I had students who took the class every single time. They just wanted to keep coming back, and they'd tell their friends. And so, that's what we do. We bring in guest speakers too. I'd have scientists come in. I had a member of the clergy come in. I had a magician come in, a professional working magician, because I always suspected that working magicians are not just doing stage magic. They might be doing some other stuff. And he said that that's true. Some of them are very gifted people who can do stuff, and some dabble in the dark arts as well, as he said. Not my friend who does it, but other people do. And let's see, who else have I brought in? I've brought in other psychics, and we've had seances. We had a paranormal investigation on our campus. We'd go out, and there's a haunted playground that we have. Used to be a children's center on campus where the students would drop off their kids so they could go to school, and then they'd have child development teachers who were learning how to be, teachers to work with the kids. And then they shut it down, and it's just like it's like an abandoned playground. So it's very haunted. And the reason I found out is because the security guards on the campus and the custodians, the night custodians, told me. Because I like to talk to the people who, especially the custodians. Nobody ever sees them during the day. Very, not very often. And these are really cool people, and they really enjoyed me interviewing them. And they told me all about the hauntings on the campus. And then we did some of those investigations. So we did a little bit of everything. And I really miss those students, and they're from all walks of life, from younger students to older students, and different nationalities and different ethnicities and genders and so forth. And but they all had that one thing in common: they wanted a safe place to tell us what happened to them, and to put it into some kind of meaning, to some kind of context.
Right.
So that's what we worked on together, and I miss those students, and I miss all my students, because I just do online now, but it's especially those paranormal students.
That must have been a fun class. That's a class that I would have been interested in doing, for sure.
There's a lot of people have told me that, and I had skeptics take the class too. I had some fellow faculty members that thought they could go in there and just say, oh, this is a bunch of hooey, this isn't real. And by the end of the class, I'm not going to say they were true believers, but they were asking me interesting questions like, are there such things as spirit animals? Because I think my cat has come back and is in the, I feel him in the room, and he died a year ago. And I said, yeah, of course, and he was a hardcore skeptic when he came in. He was a math professor. So he, everything was science and math.
Very left brain. Yeah.
But he's a very cool guy. So he was open enough to listen to everybody, and it changed, I think, his perception. Not that I was trying to tell him he was wrong or that you have to listen to me. We had 35 students in that class, and he listened to all of them, and they opened his mind a little bit more. Well,
that's great, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought it was cool. Yeah.
Speaking about animals, I actually had an experience like that. I was interviewing a guest on a really, really lovely chap. I just absolutely enjoyed talking to him. And the episode is called Selling Dead People's Things. Now, behind him, he had this he was the second-hand dealer, the biggest second-hand dealer in Chicago.
Oh,
And he
okay.
wrote this really funny book about the business of selling second-hand goods.
Mm-hmm.
And he had this beautiful Art Deco screen behind him, and there was a gap in the screen where I could see the floor. There was
Mm-hmm.
a gap. And we were just nearing the end of the episode, and I saw this dog walk past wagging its tail. And I said to him, "Oh, you've got a dog." And he said, "No." And I said, "I just saw a dog go past clear as day."
Mm-hmm.
And I described it to him, and he said, "Oh, I can't remember the name of the dog now. It was a real cutesy name. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
it was his sister's dog, so she had
Mm-hmm.
named him a really cutesy name."
Mm-hmm.
And he had died. The dog had died. But I saw it clear as day, and I went back to the video afterwards to see if I could find it, and damn, it just had me talking. It didn't have his
Mm-hmm.
screen on it, so I didn't capture it, but
Mm-hmm.
I cut that bit out and sent it to him so he could,
Mm-hmm.
see for himself. But that was a very interesting experience to have while I was recording the interview.
Yeah, I love animals. We can't have any animals here at the house because Ginger, my wife, is allergic to animals with fur. Any kind of. I guess she would be okay with a reptile, but we don't want a reptile. But so, but the only good part of it, because I love animals so much, and and they always. We usually outlive our animals, our companions, and I just would be so torn up. I mean, I'm still sad about cats. I've mainly had cats, but I love all animals. But the only good thing about not having pets is that I don't have to go through that loss thing. So whenever I go see somebody or I see animals, I just enjoy other people's animals.
Yeah.
And when they post pictures, I always comment on them, on Facebook or whatever, I'm enjoying them that way. But I really feel connected to animals, especially cats. I think that's who I'm really attached to.
Same. I'm a cat person. I'm absolutely a cat person. Old cat lady. I've only got one, but I'm an old cat lady. But yes, that was your maths professor talking about his animal. That just brought that to my mind. And was he comforted by that?
Yeah, he was. Once he realized that he wasn't imagining it, that this was a possibility, and other people have had very similar experiences, I think he took some comfort in that he, not that he still didn't grieve the loss of being in this world, but he at least felt like the cat was still around, and that made him feel better. So, and that's the whole purpose of mediumship or any of that stuff is not so much about being 100% accurate, but just being of service or comfort to somebody and providing them sometimes with closure and things like that. And that's really the most important thing that I've seen, in my experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're quite right about that. Then let's talk about some of them. The spirit that you see are ones that have passed over, correct? Not earthbound spirits, because there's a difference. Those that haven't moved on, who have stayed around the earth plane, they tend to just still have their earth memories and their earth characteristics, and they don't have the expanded view that those that have moved on do.
Yeah, and
at least that's been my experience.
No,
anyway.
I think you're right, and that my friend Jean, who passed on and is in a very good place. When people ask me, and I never take money for anything. If people say, "I'd like you to contact my Uncle Charlie," or what, I said, "Well, I will try. I don't charge anything, but I can't guarantee I can. He might not want to talk to me, but I'll try for." So I do it as like a favor for people, and I always ask Gene to help me because he's very good at. I see his hand, reaching out to people to bring them where they need to go. Because there are earthbound spirits, those that are stuck for whatever reason. And I think a lot of what you encounter out there is not necessarily malevolent, but can be very annoying. They can be energy drainers. They can grab onto you and just hang on because they so desperately want to be connected. And they're not trying to do you harm, but they can drain energy from you. And that's why you have to be protected. And you had, like you say, question. And I think you need to have protection. If you're going to open yourself up, you have to be protected, and you have to understand that there are risks that go with that.
Yes, you're right. There is a point, though. Some of these spirits, that the earthbound ones, not the ones that are moved on, the earthbound ones, some of them do know what they're doing, though. And some of them deliberately target people. And like I say to my members, if they were nasty, malicious, mean predators in life, then if they haven't moved on, that's exactly how they're going to be in spirit. I've had members who have encountered such beings, including sexual predators.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been attacked by them. So there are those around who are like that, but there's not, they're not that common, but they're common enough to cause issues to people. And so you do have to question who comes around you. You do have to check how they make you feel. And you're right, they can't hide their true intent for long.
They can, yeah, I think you're right. No, they can trick you using whatever weaknesses you might have or devices or whatever. Not in this book, but in the Timeless Trinity, I talked about a very negative experience I had, and it was in Chicago. You mentioned Chicago earlier. What happened is I was on a show, and some movie producer guy called me after the show, and he said, I think I'd like to test you for a documentary that I'm doing. And I said, okay. And he was like an independent film producer. He wasn't like a Hollywood guy or something. And he said, I'd like to fly you out to Chicago, take you to some paranormal sites, and see what you can pick up on, and I'll film you, and so forth. So this was a couple of years. This was early January 2019. So a couple of years ago. And I said, okay, but only if Ginger can come with, because I wanted her to come with, just in case the guy's a real weirdo. I wanted, have a witness there, because you never know. And so, he put us up in a hotel, and it was real. He was a film producer, and he had, he took me to different places, most of them like a graveyard at an old haunted road, and I picked up on some stuff there, but it wasn't anything dramatic. I wasn't really impressing him, like, oh my gosh, this guy is really a good psychic. I was kind of rusty or slow picking up on stuff. But then he took me to the south side of Chicago, and I knew I needed to impress this guy, and I took it as a challenge, and my pride got in the way. And this is this is a cautionary tale for anybody, whether you're a psychic or not. You can set yourself up for disaster by letting your pride take over, and hubris even. And I wanted to prove to this guy what a great psychic I am, or whatever. So it's funny now, but it wasn't funny at the time. But so we drove to the south side of Chicago, got out in this parking lot, and there's like this alley behind the building. And as soon as I got out of the car, I just put up my radar dish. I didn't even bother to do any protection or any preparation. I just went right straight into it. And I saw, like it was an old black and white movie right in front of me in that alleyway. In my mind's eye, I saw like it was the 1890s. There were horses and buggies and people dressed in dark clothing. They were all moving, very hyperkinetic, moving really fast, except for this one man that was standing in front of me, staring at me. And he had a bowler hat, this big curly mustache, really dark, kind of scary eyes, and like a long coat. And he just sat there staring at me, and he made me very nervous. And then it all disappeared, right? So then I said, I got to make a connection again. I lost the connection. So I wandered into the alley, and I went up to a tree, because I like to find old objects and touch them and see if I can help amplify, what has happened. And the only clue this guy gave me, he said, this is a very dark place. That's all he didn't tell me anything else about this site. So I go up to the tree. I was about to touch the tree, and then I was tackled to the ground. I mean, and there wasn't anybody there, physically there. And I'm a big guy. I'm about 6 feet, 3 inches, about 280 pounds. I'm very big. And drove me into the ground, and I injured my leg. It was so forceful. And the worst part of it is that I started to give up. It's like I lost my will. Wow. It's like I couldn't get up. It's like what's wrong with me? And he had a microphone on me. He didn't have the camera ready. So he was listening to all this as I was describing it. And I was in pain, and I felt like I lost my energy. I've lost my will. And then I started to see like people under the ground, like in a dungeon. There's men, women, and children, and they were all being tortured, and they were like grabbing at me, like pleading for help, and it was horrible. And finally, I was able to break loose from this and stand up. Although I was injured, I was able to walk. And then he came running to me and he said, I feel odd. There's something wrong here. And I said, yes, there's something wrong. I described what was going on. I said, you need to get me out of here. It's quick. I need to get out of here. I don't want to be here anymore. So we got into the car and we were driving away. And I said, what is this place? And he told me this was the site of the Murder Hotel, where Dr. H.H. Holmes, who was America's first mass murderer, had built this hotel for the Chicago World's Fair in the 1890s. And he murdered up to 300 men, women, and children, tortured them in the dungeons of this fake hotel, really is what it was. And so his, I would guess, earthbound, malevolent spirit was still there. And all those tortured souls were there. And because I didn't protect myself, I was not only psychically attacked, I was physically attacked. It manifested into a physical, driving me into this, like I was going down into this dungeon.
Yeah.
And so I always say it's a cautionary tale. I told my students, my paranormal students, when I got back, and I still had some kind of lingering energy on me from that. And two of the ladies in my class they were working psychics, and so they said you have to go get a spiritual cleansing or something because you're making us sick, the energy that's still attached to you. So I knew a Peruvian shaman, and I went to her and she did a cleansing, and it helped immediately. Because I had just said I didn't do any protection. I was letting my ego drive me, and I was going to impress this guy somehow, and that's how it got set up. And so that was a very, very negative experience, and just goes to show you how you have to question things, and you have to, obviously I don't blame the producer because he wanted dramatic stories. That's what they wanted. The last thing in his mind was I was going to get hurt, but
yeah.
But anyway, that is what happened. But I blame myself really for I know better,
Yeah.
And so, but now if he would have told me that was I probably would. I don't know. I would have been cautious. I would have,
You would have gone and ready and prepared. And
yes.
I've actually heard about that place. And didn't he create it? He built it so there were traps in it and mazes and people couldn't escape.
Yeah.
Nasty.
Yeah, he was terrible, and they. I read a book. There's a good book about a good book. It's a scary book. It's called Devil in the White City. It's about him, and apparently while he was in prison, his face started to change and become. He described it. He was becoming to look like Satan or looking like a devil, but so he was obviously a very sinister and evil person. And or maybe there's an evil entity that was driving him, that was still attached to that area. And
I was just going to say to you, it's the land, something on that land.
Yes,
that's what I got.
Taken away from the Native Americans, there's
probably a sacred area.
There's a lot of negative energy in Chicago. In fact, he took me to other places, not as scary as that place, but there was like a demonic tattoo parlor. I picked up on stuff right away, and it was extremely creepy. And I actually got some of the information right that he knew about, that a man had been murdered, and there was these satanic bikers that hung out there. And when we were there filming, I went up to touch the iron. There's like two gargoyles on either side of the entrance, and I was like touching the iron gate in front of the door. I was just kind of touching it, and it was dark. There wasn't anybody inside the room behind it. I could see in there, and all of a sudden, this lady appeared. She was a young lady. She would have been a rather attractive lady, but she had so many tattoos all over her face and her arms and everything. And she had black hair with red and yellow to make it look like flames,
Right.
And she suddenly appeared and said, "What was I doing there?" And I couldn't lie. I said, "Well, I'm a psychic and we're filming." That's what I said. I was so caught off. I was like, "Where did she
Yeah.
come from? I didn't even see anybody in there. All of a sudden she's there." And then she goes, "Oh, that's cool, but you can't come inside." And I said, No, I don't want to come inside." She said, "Okay." And then she went and then disappeared. She was gone. So,
Oh,
but that was that same trip. It was scary, but it wasn't as scary as the murder hotel.
these are really, really cool stories. So, what other experiences have you had?
Yeah, other types of experiences. Let's see. Well, I've had full-bodied apparitions. I went on a if you're talking about apparitions, that's what you meant, other than alien stuff.
Yeah.
I went on a job interview before I got the job here. I went on a job interview in New London, New Hampshire, in the northeast of the United States, and a place called Colby Sawyer College, and I got there kind of late in the afternoon, early evening, and the caretaker guy met me at the bus stop. I took a bus there from Boston, and he was going to take me to my hotel. And I said, okay. And then I saw this creepy old building, like built in the late 1700s, early 1800s, with a bell tower on a little hill. And it was early in the spring, so there wasn't any leaves yet. So there's like this scary looking tree in front of it, right? And I said, "Where's the hotel?" And he said, "Well, you're going to be staying at the old Academy building." And I said, "That place?" And he said, "Yeah." The whole thing looked like a Stephen King novel, like a scene from a Stephen King novel. I just already I knew it was going to be exciting. So so he took me there, and I got my bag out, and he walked me upstairs, said, "This is the room you're going to be staying in." A beautiful place, well preserved, the furniture, antique furniture, this really high bed, it was just beautiful.
Mm.
Well preserved. And I said, "Who else is staying here?" And he said, "Nobody." And I okay, I'm the only one staying here. And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I'll come by in the morning to pick you up." I said, "All right." So I got ready for bed. I would brush my teeth, and I got ready, and I was reading a book, and all of a sudden I started hearing like voices downstairs. I was on the second floor, and people walking on the wooden old creaky wooden floor, and like chairs shuffling around. So I went downstairs, and it stopped. And then I went back to bed, and I thought, "Oh, it's my imagination, I guess." And then it started again. And then I got to the top of the stairs, and I said, I don't know what his name was, Al or something. I said, "Al, is that you? Who is down there?" And once again, it stopped. So that went on most of the evening. It just kept, I heard like there were people, lots of people downstairs, chairs shuffling around, the sound of people. So the next day, I went to get a cup of coffee before the guy was going to pick me up, and there was a street sweeper there, and he was from New Hampshire. He had that New Hampshire accent, which I can't do. It's a very unique accent, English or American English accent. And he said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "I'm here for a job interview." And he said, "Where are you staying?" And I said, "In the old Academy building." And he goes, "Uh-huh. Did they tell you it was haunted?" And I said, "No, they didn't bother to tell me that, but I can tell you for sure it's haunted because I heard all this stuff." And he said, "Oh yeah, it's one of the most haunted places in New England." And I said, "Oh, great." But I survived the night, so I thought I'd be okay. And I did the job interview, whatever. It took too long. I missed the bus. So they said, "Guess what? You're going to have to stay overnight one more night." I said, "Okay." Once again, I was in this old building, right? The old Academy building. So it started the next night, same pattern, the voices, the, moving around of chairs, and then this old, like the sound of an old Victrola, like those wind up old Victrolas, this old creepy music. And I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to get any sleep? So I just pulled the covers over my head. And then I said, okay, it's like the noise died down. I thought, oh, okay, maybe I'll catch a break. So I dropped the covers, and then in the corner of the room, there was this old woman, an apparition of a woman, full-bodied apparition, like a hologram. She's semi-transparent, and she's just standing there looking at me. She's dressed like a Puritan woman. She's got this all dark clothing with the bonnet, and just looking at me very sternly. She didn't say anything, and she didn't respond when I said something. I said, I'm leaving in the morning, ma'am. I'm sorry. I don't want to disturb you or whatever. And she was there, and after a few minutes, then she went away, right? So the next morning, I made it through the night. Oh, I think I called my ex-wife, but I called her and I said, all this stuff is happening. And she said, you need to get out of there. And I said, I can't. There's no place else to stay. What am I going to do? I've had other ghost experiences, so I think I can make it. Well, the next morning I got up and I looked around upstairs, and there were portraits, like a portrait gallery. And I was drawn to this one portrait, and I walked to it, and there she was. There was the Susan Colby, the founder of the college. At that time, it was a women's college. She didn't like me there because it was a women's college, and she didn't want a man sleeping in that room. So that's why I figured why she didn't want me there. And then I didn't know this place was haunted, other than that street cleaner who told me. When I got home, I did some research and found out that it is one of the most haunted places in New England. And lots of people, there have been faculty who get snowed in and then they stay at the old academy, but they've had similar experiences. So it's been corroborated by other people. But it was a very pronounced, clear, full-bodied apparition. And there's just no denying it. It's not like you catch a glimpse of something. She was there, and she's connected, and there's other evidence. There's her portrait there and other people telling you, and all the other noises. And, I think it was the Victrola. Other than seeing her, it was the Victrola that was really the most frightening sound. Just so unexpected.
Yeah.
So
that sounds like that's residual.
Yes, I think because she didn't communicate with me. It was all just captured there in that building. Now, since then, they've turned it into an office building for the city of New London, New Hampshire, and but there's been new reports that other things are happening there now. They moved all the old furniture out, but that didn't, there's still some residual energy there. Yeah. So a little different, but still, that's the latest thing I heard from there.
Oh, that's really interesting. That must have been, you must have, well, I guess by that stage you had been used to being around spirits, so it didn't phase you as much as it might have phased, but still scary enough, though.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I knew that she wasn't going to hurt me, and the sounds weren't going to hurt me. But still, it's discomforting. I mean, it's hard to go to sleep because you have these this thought that it's so out of the ordinary. Even though I've had those experiences before, and I forgot to say, the street sweeper told me, after he told me it was haunted, he said, last week there was a lady in for an interview. They put her up there, and she didn't make it through the night. She came out of the thing in the middle of the night screaming, and the sheriff had to come, and they took her to another town and put her in a hotel. So, so that was before my second night, and I thought, oh, great, maybe, yeah. So I made it. I lived through it and was able to write about it and talk about it. But so that was Mrs. Colby, Susan Colby.
Wow, that's really cool that you were able to name the woman.
Mm-hmm.
I had a kind of a similar experience where I was able to name the spirit, but this one was seen by 3 other people besides myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked about it on the podcast before. My husband then, he's deceased now, but I had my husband in the car, my daughter in the back seat, and we were driving along a cemetery. I was trying to find my great-grandmother's grave in the cemetery in Hamilton, and it was the original cemetery in Hamilton, and it had this like little road with these grave markers, really big ones that you can hide behind on either side, and we were only doing like 10 kilometers an hour, 5 miles an hour or something like that. It was, very slow, and the car was behind us. And all of a sudden, because these grave markers are right on the edge of the road, all of a sudden this really tall woman, slender woman, really skinny, she looked like she was from the 40s. She had the wavy hair, she had a twin set on. Do you know what a twin set is? It's like a top and a cardigan that look the same. That
match. Okay.
And she had pearls around her neck. She had a pleated skirt, tights and those Irish brogue shoes, the lace-up shoes that they used to wear in those days, very practical shoes. She stepped out in front of the car, slammed on the brakes, that were going really fast, and I thought I'd hit her. And I sat there for a minute because she fell. She looked like she fell onto the car, and I sat there for a minute in shock. And Jane, I looked at her and I said, oh my God, I've hit her. And the car behind us stopped, and the person started, I got out and jumped around the front expecting to see this woman lying there, and there was nobody there. And this guy came up behind us and he said, it wasn't your fault. I saw her. She's just stepped right out in front of you. There was no way you could avoid her. And so we thought, oh, maybe in the time between, gathering from my shock and getting out of the car, she'd crawled away somewhere. So I went to the right of the car because she stepped out from my right side. So I went to the right thinking maybe she'd gone that way, and the gravestone immediately by the road had a picture of her on it.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
So yeah. I could
You got confirmation. Yeah. That's really good. Yeah. When you can piece it together, tie it into, but that is a cool story. Yeah. That's really cool.
So I totally understand how you felt when you were able to say, oh my God, that's this woman I saw. That's who it was.
I have another one. Actually, I'd like your opinion on it because I've told a couple of people, and I think I wrote about it in maybe in the second or maybe the first book, but I had a girlfriend when I was in graduate school, and she had some issues, some mental problems, and she had tried to commit suicide, and she ended up in a mental hospital, and she checked herself in and so forth. And I went to visit her, and this was in Seattle. I was living in Seattle, and at the time, after graduate school, actually, and I went to visit her, and I was trying to have a nice conversation with her. There were other patients there that were being quiet, playing checkers or watching TV. But there was this one man who came in there, and his name was George. And he had his hair was all messed up, and he was kind of a thin, slender man with these big wire rim glasses. And he was very loud and very, just talking to everybody. And he was interrupting our conversation, and he was playing the piano, and he was hyperkinetic. He was everywhere, right? And so I kept talking to my girlfriend, and then she was able to get a pass so we could go down. Go down the elevator onto the first floor and walk out into the garden. Right. And so and there was only one way off that floor. It was the psych floor, and was controlled. And so you had to go through a guard. He had a special thing he put in the elevator so you could go down into the elevator. You have to go through the guard, and you need a pass and a badge to go through there. Well, we went down in the elevator, got out on the first floor. We're walking towards the outside doors, towards the garden area, and coming the other direction was this mental patient, George. He was still in his hospital gown or whatever he was wearing up there, and there were two women on either side of him that I didn't recognize, and I asked my girlfriend. I said, "Isn't that George?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, how did he get down here?" She said, "I don't know. Maybe he has a twin." And I said, "No, I don't. This is not television. That's not the premise here. That is George." And so I asked him. He's walking by and he's laughing, and these girls are giggling. And I said, "George, how'd you get down here?" And he looked at me with these really wild eyes, and he said, "I flew." And then he laughed and he walked on with these two girls. So we kept walking, and I said, "How did George get down here? Seriously?" And she said, "Well, maybe you should report it." And I said, "No, I don't, people aren't going to believe me." And so I said, "No, I'm not going to report it." So we walked down to the garden and had a conversation, brought her back up, and he was there. So I've told this story to a number of people and a couple of people, and there's a couple of different options, I guess, that could have happened. And I'd just be interested in what your take might be. Obviously, this guy, the guard did not let him. I mean, even if he did let him into that elevator and to only way out to go down there, how did he get ahead of us? Because he was still on the floor when we left. So I'd just be interested in what you think. Process.
There's a couple of things that come to mind. And actually, you had that in the Anzar book.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I wrote that down.
I remember.
Okay.
As soon as you started talking, I know this. And there's a couple of things that come to my mind. One is he bilocated, which, often people who have mental health issues actually are very spiritual. And that's the reason why they're there, because they can't deal with it, and they have abilities and they just don't know how to cope with them. So a lot of them end up in psychiatric hospitals. That's my personal opinion.
I think you're right. I think, and he was really, really intelligent too. I mean, you could tell he just was all over the place,
Yes, manic. Yeah. So he could have bilocated, or there could have been a timeline glitch. But I tend to feel that they would have noticed him if he wasn't in there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that I lean towards bilocation, and that he had these abilities, and the other added wrinkle to this whole thing, that's that whole thing. But who were these two ladies that were with him? Were there?
That's the question.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Who did they? Because at first my girlfriend said, well, maybe they're nurses, and they weren't wearing nurse clothes. They looked more like exotic dancers than nurses. And so I'm wondering if he was able to manifest them with him. Maybe that's what he wanted, to be with these two ladies.
I was just going to say, it could have been a projection of his desire. Oh, gosh, we could go into the realms of speculation here, couldn't we? Yeah.
But it was fascinating. It really was. And it's so, and that it was witnessed by my girlfriend too, and she wasn't, psychic or anything. It just, she was able to see it, Yeah. But
it could have been a projection of his desire. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and then it begs the question, what is reality? Is reality as we perceive it, or are we living in a holographic reality?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that takes us on a whole different,
I know.
was that a glitch in the matrix? Did you see something from a past event that he was projecting, But it wouldn't have been unless he saw you in that timeline. Who knows? It's really...
I know. It's a mind blower. It really is. Yeah. And it's really stuck with me. I was already, this was obviously a very terrible time in my relationship with my girlfriend. I felt so bad that she had tried to commit suicide. So it was, she was emotionally traumatized. I was traumatized, but, this really did happen. I know that it really did happen. And so, I tend towards the bilocation, and probably he manifested this from some past thing, or he just conjured them up, with his bilocation. But you're right. If he was missing from the ward, they would have known it, because he was such a presence. If it was silent, which it would be if he wasn't there, from what I gathered and what my girlfriend told me, that they would notice. The guard would notice. The nurses would notice.
Were there stairs there that he could have gone down? But even then, he wouldn't have gone as fast.
He couldn't have gone that fast, and the stairs were guarded as well, and they were, locked. There was a guy with the key, but they're obviously for fire, they couldn't go in the emergency. You'd have to go down the stairs, but you couldn't get down through the stairs either. So there's only one way on and off, and that was that guard at the elevator. And there's no way he could have got down before us. When he was on the floor when we left, we got down and he was coming towards the elevators, from the other direction, as if he had been outside. So,
yeah, absolutely. I would file that under glitch in the matrix.
Isn't it? Isn't that it? Yeah, it's something I often think about, and it's one of those things where or many things that you think about, that this, this reality, it's an interface to the quantum reality, that we have this comfortable interface that every once in a while you catch a glimpse, whether it's a ghost or an alien or whatever it is. And you realize, oh, this is just a very comfortable little interface, like my computer keyboard, but the real stuff that goes on, like the toggling of voltages, we don't see any of that. All we see is our nice little keyboard, We don't
Yeah,
see
yeah.
we don't see the ghost in the machine.
Exactly. Like I
Yeah.
do computer coding, a little bit of coding.
Hmm.
You don't see the code that
Hmm.
makes this image that we're looking
Right.
at the moment. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So let's start with your books then.
Hmm.
Let's start with your supernatural journey in literature.
Hmm.
So tell us first what made you start to write your memories.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, since age 4, I've had paranormal experiences, but they've always been very frequent, but random. I had no
Right.
control over it. It just happened. And I didn't understand why it happened. I tried to study parapsychology, but then life got in the way and I had to do all this work and
Right.
take care of my family and so forth. So I always had it on the back burner that I was going to get to it one of these days.
Yeah, yeah.
But it really took losing a dear friend of mine, childhood buddy. He was also had Norwegian parents. They were immigrants together, and we grew up together in Seattle with immigrant parents. And he passed away in 2016. He had cancer, and he was about my age, so he was much too young. And
Right.
he came to me in a vision just like you and I are talking. I saw him a month after he died, and I was very pleased to see him because I was very heartbroken after he passed away. He's like one
Yeah.
of these really uplifting people. He walks into a room and he just lights up the room, and not because he's like a overbearing person and loud. He was just such a loving person. He was an actor, so
Right.
he was very good, personable. Anyway, he passed away. His name is Gene. Or his name is Gene. He's still around, as he reminds me all the time in the spirit world. But he came to me in this vision and told me it was time to start telling my stories. And I was kind of reluctant. I said, well, hey, I could lose my job. People will laugh at me. My colleagues will, laugh at me. The college might get rid of me.
Yeah.
I'll lose my academic standing. And he said, don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. And he even gave me the name of what the book should be called. He said it should be called Timeless, because he said we are all timeless. And he said, where I am in the spirit world, there's no future, there's no past. It's just the eternal now.
Mm.
And he said, it just all is together. And I said, okay. And I said, I asked him, what a lot of people would say, what's it like to be dead? I just was very blunt. I just said, and he laughed and he said, you know what? I don't feel like I'm dead. I mean, he said, besides, I'm talking to you, right? So there you go. We're talking to each other. I mean, it wasn't like some of these ghosts things are like tape loops, you can't communicate
Yes.
with them, but I
Yeah.
could communicate with him clearly. And so we had a good laugh about that. And then he told me it was going to be okay. And every time I go on a spirit walk, what I call a spirit walk, I communicate with him and other spirit friends. So he's with me all the time. Every time I'm interviewing, I always talk about Gene, and I feel like he's on my shoulder, kind of, wanting to be in the shot somehow, because he was an actor. He wants his screen time. But so then I started assembling all my stories, and I'd written all this down, most of the things that had happened to me. And then I published my first Timeless book. I think it was 34. 30. I think there was 34 paranormal events in my life, all that happened to me, not other people. And that was the first book. And then that wasn't enough. I had to do a second book. So then I did Timeless Deja Vu, which is the second book. And I went a little bit further. The first book I was kind of reserved. I didn't talk about aliens, for instance. I figured I'm just going to dip my toe in the water, a little bit. I didn't want to plunge all the way in. And that was my compromise. Gene said, go all the way in. I said, no, I'm going to test the water. So the second book, I went a little bit further. The third book, Timeless Trinity, I started talking about alien events, contact that I've had. And so, as I say, I let it all hang out in the third book, Timeless Trinity. And I hadn't really planned to write another book, but during this time, I started these spirit walks, these meditative spirit walks. And for me, I do meditation, but I do it while I'm walking, because I can't sit still and do the meditation. So During the spirit walks, I talked to Gene, I talked to my spirit guides, I talked to, my relatives who passed on. And that's when I decided that I was going to try to contact this person, this entity that I had another vision with from 1997, and called the progenitor. That's all I knew. He was called the progenitor. And so I asked Gene, I asked my spirit guides, can you connect me with the progenitor? I'd really like to know more, because, and I suspected he was of alien origin. I kind of thought he was, but I didn't want to go there yet too far. And so what happened in 97 was a vision just like I had with Gene, and a conversation just like you and I are having. Although in the vision I had of the progenitor, he was this kind of proto-human looking entity, and he was revolving in space. And while I was talking to him, and at that point, he sounded very Zen-like to me, like he was saying there, the bargain for peace is war, the bargain for hate is love. He's talking like that, and then he's talking about black holes and quasars, and how the one dimension is connected to the other through a black hole, and it comes out as a quasar on the other side. And he was trying to explain all this stuff to me. I wrote it all down, and I even drew the picture of him, but I just kept it. And that was happening in 97. In 2001, I decided I was going to try to approach a colleague with this information that I had, and to talk about the paranormal. And I found this lady, professor, she's a very nice lady, a friend of mine. She was an anthropologist. She studied ancient cultures and religion and stuff. So I thought, okay, she's a safe person,
right,
to talk to this. At least I thought. And I told her the story of the progenitor. I showed her the picture, and she just looked at me and said, "You're a pretty spacey dude, aren't you?" I didn't realize how spacey you were. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to, not say anything. I thought it wasn't safe. So it wasn't until 2016 that when I had that vision with Gene, that I decided now was the time. And so my the fourth book, the Anzar, the progenitor book, is that entity. And I've had a much longer connection with him than just since 1997. He's been around, I think, my whole life. I know in 1964, that's when I, based on conscious memories, as I started thinking about what had happened to me in 1964, I realized that was him. And then I did a hypnotic regression. I did 4 of them, 4 different of these regressions, and that kind of filled in the blanks for me in these stories. But I found out that Anzar, the progenitor, has been with me at least since 1964, when I was 6 years old.
So what happened in 1964?
Well, to make a long story short, we had these neighbors. We lived in Seattle on a hill, and there was a nuclear site at the top of the hill. It was a Nike missile site. They had Nike missile defense sites, and the house just above us, we had some neighbors, and my parents, when they'd go places, I would go up there and they would babysit me.
Right.
And the lady was okay, but the man was creepy. Even at 6 years old, I knew he was creepy. So, and I just somehow knew, and he would do weird things, and kids from the neighborhood would come there, and he would give us little Dixie cups filled with what he said was Kool-Aid, but I smelled it. Didn't smell right. It smelled like what my parents had, they'd have brandy or something. It smelled like that. Now I know that it was alcohol. So he'd give kids alcohol, and then he would go hide in the closet, and in the dark closet. And it was not even hide and seek, because we knew where he was. And he said, "You have to come find me." And he said, "Well, you're in the closet. We know where yeah, but you come in there." And then you go in the closet with him, and it's dark. And I mean, basically what he was up to. He was a molester, but I didn't know it. I never went in the closet. I was too afraid. I didn't drink the Dixie cup, but I wanted to tell my parents that I didn't want to go there anymore. So then that's when this Anzar, the progenitor, showed up the first time. And I saw him like a hologram in my backyard, between that house and my house. And he appeared to me, and I said, "You look like," I remember, you look like a monster," because he was an alien, looked very tall,
Right.
and with the big, slanted eyes. And I said, "You look like a monster." And he said, "Well, I'm not the monster. That man in that house is a monster, and you need to stay away from him." So he saved me from a very
Right.
awful thing that would have happened. And I said, "Well, should I tell my parents?" And he said, "I think you just tell your parents you don't want to go there, and I know that they won't make you go there anymore." So, and that was true. So, and I said, "Well, can I tell them about you?" And they said, "Well, that's up to you. They may not believe that you're talking to me, but if you want to, you can. But definitely, you're not. I'm going to make sure you don't have to go up there anymore," which was true. I didn't. And he also showed me like a holographic image of a ship, and he said that someday you will fly. Someday you will fly. And so I assumed I would, like every kid in the '60s, I thought I was going to go to the moon or something, be an astronaut.
Right.
As it turned out, I did fly, but it was a helicopter. But I was still a pilot, so that's pretty cool. And so that was my first experience. And but it was so traumatic. The experience was so traumatic because here I saw this alien entity who I thought was a monster at first. Turned out that he rescued me, but I didn't understand the whole thing. So I was very traumatized. So for about 2 years after that, I couldn't speak. I stammered, I stuttered so much. I had to go to special speech training for 2 hours a day. They'd pull me out of my regular class and I'd go to speech training. And thank goodness they had a good speech therapist at my school. And after 2 years, I could start talking again because I was very reluctant to talk because I could barely get a word out.
Yeah.
And I did some research in the book, the Anzar book I just published. I did some research on speech pathology, and one of the reasons for children suddenly developing that kind of speech impediment is through trauma. So I was definitely traumatized. So that's like physical evidence to go along with the conscious memories and then the retrieved subconscious memories. But so I've had a very long history with him. I've had other alien experiences too, and then all the paranormal experiences. But for the last 3 years, I've been contacting Anzar through my spirit walks, and including just yesterday. So when I took a spirit walk.
Right.
So, yeah.
What did he say to you out of interest?
Oh, yesterday? Yeah, he reminded me, as he does every single time, to keep love in my heart and always operate from a position of love. So that sounds very easy, but it's very hard to do because you hear it I was in a faculty meeting today and I heard people talking bad about other people. And I just thought, I just, that's not the good way to approach it. You got to help people to understand, and you just got to educate them or help them to understand. They still might not understand, but it's best to have that love in your heart. And then he reminded me of the situation here with the variant, the Delta variant, and how it's going to be very, very bad, and to be prepared for that and be ready for that. And he's also, he kind of, he's been telling me lately, and especially yesterday, he reminded me that I'm a bridge. He says, you have to be the bridge. Now, he's always told me that you have to be the light. And he says that all the time, be the light. And so that makes sense to me in a way that, you have to help illuminate, the darkness, try to bring, it goes along with this idea of keeping love in your heart, to illuminate and to be the light in people's lives, in your own life, your loved ones, your neighbors, your friends. But he said, you have to be the bridge. You have to do more. You can't just illuminate. Now you have to make connections, so you got warring factions, or you have like a physical bridge, you got two remote outcroppings, you bring them together.
Right.
And what's interesting to me is since I was a little kid, I've been fascinated with bridges. And I even wrote a play called The Bridge about the Golden Gate Bridge and the problem with suicide on the Golden Gate Bridge. And oddly enough, and I just thought about it now, when I was growing up, we had these old Norwegian friends that my parents had that they came over with on the boat to the States. And there was this lady and a husband a man who they never had children. She was a very nice older lady. And every time I came over, or she came over to our house, to visit my parents, she would say, "Let's make the bridge." And she didn't do it to anybody else. It was like her little thing to me. And she'd go like this with her hand. And then I would come up and go like that, and we'd make a bridge. So it's like been a theme my whole life. I didn't realize the importance of it until later in my life. So those are a couple of the things he's told me. He's also told me that he kind of gives me, I'm not going to call them predictions, but they border on prophecies, but they're more like preparations, because he often tells me predictions can be wrong, but preparations are never wrong. So he's warned me that here in the United States that we're bordering on a civil war. And because we're so divided, and it's other places in the world too, but I know the United States the best, and we are so divided, more divided than I even remember us being in the 1960s during the Vietnam War and all that. We're more divided now at a deeper level, even a religious level. I mean, it's really spiritual level, very, very divided. So, and he's, he tells me to be prepared for that and that's why he wants me to be the light, to be the bridge. He has made some predictions, that like COVID, he didn't tell me there would be COVID-19. He said a year before COVID became a thing in the early, last year, a year before that, he told me that there'd be a series of calamities that would occur and to be prepared. And as it turned out, he said, and he said, one of the calamities will cause the deaths of millions of people. I didn't know what that calamity would be, but I've done enough research about what they call retrocausation, where if something really terrible happens, that it reverberates because time, there's no past, there's no future, it's all together. Yeah. Sensitive people can pick up on things, and he helps guide me with that. So if I get an intuition, I think something bad's going to happen, he says, well, be prepared because there's a possibility that could happen. And then when I say, well, shouldn't I tell a bunch of people? And he said, well, be careful because predictions can be wrong. And if you're wrong just by a little bit, people are going to think, you're crazy or, something's wrong with you, when really you're just trying to help. Yeah. And I've had people do that. I've said, when I think it was in January of 2020, before there were even any cases of COVID-19, I said, this is probably one of the calamities. This is one of the calamities. And I had people attack me on Facebook and say that I'm exaggerating. And, it was, so I've been very careful, saying this. That's why I always say, that it's better to be prepared. And there's too many variables to accurately predict exactly what's going to happen, because there's free will and there's other things that enter into it. So anyway, those are a few of the things. He's also told me some, I don't know how much you want me to say about what he said, but he's talked about, this report that came in the United States that came out the end of June on UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, what used to be called UFOs, but now the government had to call it something else because they were too embarrassed to call them UFOs. So same thing. But anyway, he told me that the report would be very disappointing, and it was, but I can read between the lines. I used to work in the government, so I read between the lines, and there's some interesting clues in there when you really read it. Oh, yes. But he told me, he said the problem, and if you look at it, you see it mentions threats, I think probably 8 times in there, threats. And that's the way our government looks at it. And I'm not surprised if other governments around the world look at it the same way, that they don't look at it as an opportunity to advance as a civilization, as human beings. They see it as a threat. And, just like the old movies, when the aliens came, we'd roll out the tanks and start shooting at them, just ridiculous, But that's how we look at it. And Anzar has told me, and I want to get the quote right. He said, extraterrestrial technology and wisdom are precious gifts for all, not a strategic advantage for the few.
That's actually a good quote. I do know that there are factions that those who control the governments behind the scenes, the governments really don't control much. They're just figureheads. They take their orders from elsewhere. Your government is really trying to ramp up the fear factor to make people scared of star people, scared of beings who use other, vehicles to get here. And not all star people need to travel in ships. Many don't.
No.
They can just travel by thought.
Yeah.
But what they're doing is they're trying to create fear in people. Yeah. And they're using that as an excuse to weaponize, to create more weapons and to control reality as we currently know it. That's my understanding. It's a bit deeper than that, but, I don't tend to go into a lot of my podcasts because that's not what my podcast is about.
But no, I agree with you that the easiest way to control people is through fear or anger, one of the two, or hope, both. If you can manage it, then they can really control people. Alternate between anger and fear.
Yeah, well, anger's only ever a secondary emotion, isn't it? And it only ever covers fear, hurt, or pain.
Yeah, it is a secondary emotion. It comes hard on the heels of the fear, so you don't often distinguish them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think you're right. I think that I have a friend of mine who's former FBI, so he still gets I guess once you're FBI, you're always FBI. It's kind of in the intelligence community. And he told me that they're busy trying to figure out how they can strap a bomb to this technology. They want to learn how to weaponize it. And so that's a fruitless effort. So if they can't do that, they at least want, like you say, manipulate people through fear, and it's so as Anzar says, this is an opportunity to take a leap of consciousness for all of us. To take a leap of consciousness and evolve as to all together take this leap of consciousness. And there's so many forces that want to stop that from happening, because if that happens, people are going to realize how powerful they are and how special they are. And they won't be able to be so easily controlled anymore once you take the blinders off,
Yeah. I can see that. I'm going to say something. When I first read your book, I was like really dubious, not because, I've had star people encounters my entire life, until I heard your story just now about you being 6. And you probably mentioned it in the book, but I may have missed or not read that correctly. But because you never question him, you never say, how do I know you're telling me the truth? How can I trust you? How can I, believe what you... And one thing that I always teach my people is you must question everything. Even what I tell you, question it. And how does it fit in your heart? How do you feel when you listen to it? How does it sit with you? Does it make you feel comfortable? But now I understand why you don't question him, because he gave you that trust from as a child. So you have trusted him because of that incident.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of experiences, including demonic experiences. So I feel that by experience, I know what that's like. Anything that's malevolent, even if they come across as being kind of nice, it doesn't take long for the true colors to come through. Sometimes immediately, and they just work on greed or whatever, vice a person might have, whatever. But with him, and I've had a person ask me, they say, how do you know he's not a fallen angel or demonic thing? And I said, well, why would a demon every single time I talk to them tell me and remind me to keep love in my heart and always operate from a position of love, and actually have that help me in my life? Where I have adopted that, and things go much better in my relationship at home, at work, in the world. It's just the way to go. And so the other reason I know that, although I've asked Jean, because I trust Jean too. I know Jean. So I asked Jean about, I don't know if I put it in the book, but I did ask Gene about Anzar, and he said, no, he's here with me. he's
Yeah, I remember reading
I got confirmation from Gene too. And so, but there are people who say, any kind of contact with spirits is divination, and that's all, they're all demons, trying to trick you. And none of my experiences with Gene or with Anzar or the others, my parents who I've talked to also in these meditative states, none of them have told me to do bad things or say bad things or what I know in my heart to be bad or do bad things. None of it. It's been none of that. And then so that's how I have confidence. And the other thing, and I think you read the book, so you've, in the introduction to the book, the foreword to the book, a friend of mine saw Anzar. So I have that confirmation too. So that, because there's always in the paranormal experiences, there's, not every weird thing that happens is paranormal. And sometimes it's just a weird thing that just happened, so I can't look at it. So you always look for confirmation. So I invited Anzar to come to a CERO meeting, the Close Encounter Resource Organization that I belong to, all experiencers, here in Southern California. And I asked Anzar to come. I said, I'd like to see who sees you. Does anybody see you? I'm just going to, at the end of the meeting, I got up and said, did anybody see anything? And because it's a CERO meeting, nobody thought it was like some guy just sitting next to me or something. They knew I was talking about some kind of entity. And this one lady named Lucy, my friend Lucy, she said, yeah, who's the big native looking dude behind you? And Anzar is very tall. One of his manifestations is that he's very tall and he's proto-human looking. And she said native, meaning Native American, he has that kind of look. And I said, that's Anzar. And she said, you're kidding me. And I said, no, that's Anzar. And then she pulled out her driver's license and she showed me that she lived on, the street she lived on was Via de Anzar, the way to Anzar.
Interesting, wasn't it?
So that was, and then she,
synchronicity.
Yeah, she was able to, and she's a shaman in the Native American tradition, Lucy is. And she talked to me quite a bit later because I said, I got to talk to you more about this. You're the only other person that's seen him other than me. So we had some lengthy conversations and we talked about this integration process that she warned me about, because when you do a lot of communication with the particular entity, you have to be very careful. And just like you said, how do you know that this is really who they say they are and it's actually helping you or helping others? And so I took that process very slow. And actually what the integration process is not that I lose my autonomous being who I am. It's just that there's a quicker connection between the two of us. So, and in the way Anzar says it, he says an aspect of you is an aspect of me. That's what he tells me. And he says that we are related. So that's what I've taken from these experiences. And but even a person with all the paranormal experiences that I've had, every once in a while, you have to stop and ask, is this real? You have to, pinch yourself and stuff like that to make sure. And I'm lucky in that Ginger is not a member of CERO. She doesn't do meditative walks. She's just a very practical, very creative lady, very nice. And so she's very supportive of me, but she also grounds me. So I don't, I'm not in the ethereal world all the time. I have to come down to earth, and I think that helps quite a bit, but she's very supportive. And I know there's some people who have had all these experiences and they're not as lucky. They have maybe a spouse or a friend or a significant other who isn't as supportive and won't let you talk about it and, that type of thing, which would be very stifling to a sensitive person who is intuitive and has these experiences and connections. Yeah. So.
Right. Absolutely. So that really was like niggling at me the whole time when I was reading your book. I was going, he never questions this guy. He never questions him. How does he know he is who he says he is? And, like I'm a medium myself and I so I don't question that these things happen, because I know from my own experience they do, although I don't talk about them a lot in this podcast, and I certainly don't have mediums on my show, because I'm not here to promote
Right.
anyone who has a business.
Right.
You
Right.
understand what I'm saying? But it doesn't mean that I don't know that it's not real, because I do. The other thing that I have to say that just triggered me a little bit is the use of the term light all the time. Light, you have to be the light. You have to, and the reason why is because in this reality, in this dimension, people are really terribly socially engineered by those who control this reality. And the term light has been bandied about so much that everybody automatically assumes that if something is light and bright, it's positive, it's good, it's loving, it's got your best interests at heart. And if something is dark, it's automatically negative, nasty, malignant, and that's not actually true. That's not actually true. It's what's been hammered into people in this reality. Light isn't always good, and dark isn't always bad.
Well, you can't have one without the other. That's for sure.
That's this reality. It's definitely a duality for sure. That's my 9. You know what I mean?
No, I understand. Yeah, I do.
And the thing is, light has been, like, it's used in all the Hollywood movies. It's propagandized. It's one of my pet peeves, I've got to say this, is when people say love and light. And they don't mean it. It's just a catchphrase because it makes them look like they're spiritual, Most don't mean it. So it's like things like, and so that triggered me. That was a trigger for me. I'm not saying that what you wrote wasn't valid or general. That's just triggered me.
No, it's a very valid and good point. I will add that the research that I did, because there's 280 footnotes or endnotes in that book. I did a lot of research. It's 403 pages, but what I did some research about the light, and I don't call myself a light worker. I say be the light because that's what Gene says. That's what Anzar says. But what I found out is that our DNA emits light, which is very interesting to me, because that may be a connection in how telepathy works, how telekinesis works, how this stuff that we are our very internal structure, our very DNA emits light. So it's more than just light and dark. Like you said, it's not just dark being evil. You can't have one without the other. And what would we be if we never had the nighttime? We need the nighttime as well. And growing up with Norwegian parents, we have, I've been in Norway during the so-called dark time. I think it's a beautiful time of year. The sun doesn't come up for 3 months, and I've lived there during that dark time. And the only negative thing because what happens is you get adjusted to it, and then the starlight is enough for you. The moonlight is enough, especially if there's a blanket of snow. It's a blue kind of light. It's very calming in a way. And people use a lot of candles and stuff. So, it's very cozy. People in the wintertime during the so-called dark time, they visit each other much more, and they realize they got to come together. And and then of course for the Christian people, there's the Christmas time and so forth. So it's very kind of a magical time. The only problem for me during that winter time, when I lived there during the winter, the 2 times, is that it's hard to get. You want to sleep all the time. I feel like a bear. I want to hibernate.
Right.
Whereas I've been there during the summer when the sun doesn't go down, and then you have the opposite problem. You can't sleep. Because I'm like a rooster. I see the light, I want to be up. So, at 2:00 in the morning, I'm out cutting the grass and making people upset, because I just feel so energized. I'm out, it's perfectly light. Yeah. So, no, I have a very natural, I understand what you're saying, and it's not, that simple. And malevolent entities can portray themselves really as anything. And, You always hear about the stories of, they appear as little girls or something, something that seems so innocent, and it's really not. But I've had experience, with malevolent entities, and it's pretty clear what they are, no matter how they portray themselves. It's pretty clear what they are because of what they do. And what they do is more important than what they look like or what they say or even what they say.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
And isn't it the same with living people as well?
Yes. In fact, I often say, kind of jokingly, but only half jokingly, that it's easier to talk to the dead than living people. They're not hiding anything for the most part. The people that have passed away, they're just, they just want somebody. They see you have the ability. They see what I call the radar dish over my head, and I want to talk to somebody. All these other thousands of people are walking by, and then I see you, and you're the one I need to talk to. So, and of course I have to protect myself because I can't talk to everybody, they're all around us all the time. So you have to turn it off. I always say, you got to learn to turn it off before you learn how to really turn it on, because turning it off is the most important thing. So you can rest, you can do other things. You can't.
Absolutely. And it's all about boundaries.
Yes, setting boundaries. Yes, exactly.
I run a Facebook group. Well, actually, that's what this podcast started from, where I, try and help people as much as I can. On a spiritual level. They come with questions, and it's, nobody's ever charged for it. It's just a really good place, and I've got some wonderful people there. And so I always say to people, well, one, never assume that something is what they portray themselves as being. Never assume that child you see in your house, and this comes up in the group all the time, is a child. In fact, just recently, I had a lady who had these children in her house, but they weren't children. And I said to her, have you ever questioned who they are? She said, no, they're just children. And I said, why do you assume that they're children? Because they portray themselves to be children. And she was having issues in her home. And so I said to her, one, you must always question whoever comes around you, whether you see them physically, with your psychic eyes, whether they appear in front of you in a physical form, whether you just feel them. You should always, always, always question. That's why I was, like when I was reading your book, I was going, he's not questioning. This could be anybody feeding him anything. Yep. And there are so many imposters out there. Apart from your connection with Anzar, have you had like physical extraterrestrial experiences?
Yeah, I've had, let's see, in 1973, I would say it was a classic kind of abduction. But even that, I think, had a positive spin to it. What was happening in 1973 is it was Christmas Eve, and my aunt and uncle from Norway, from Oslo, were visiting. And that's a whole other interest. She was a very fascinating person. But anyway, everybody was upstairs. I went down to my downstairs bedroom. This is in Seattle. And it was probably around midnight or so. My cat, who always slept with me, jumped off the bed, and he was a big fat cat. So he jumps off and he woke me up, And when I looked in the doorway, there was my aunt. And I thought, what is my aunt doing in the doorway of my room? But then all of a sudden, it wasn't my aunt. Her face kind of morphed into this, I would best describe it as like a reptilian looking face. And it wasn't just her. There was like these little entities around her. Next thing I knew, I was, it's classic abduction thing. I felt frozen, paralyzed. And then I was levitating above the bed. And the next thing you know, I'm rising up like through the all the floors of the house, through the ceiling into the heavens. I end up in what I describe as a craft. It's round. There's like this pillar in the middle. There's like an exam table. And around this exam table, there's the little grays, the little alien guys. Yeah. And there's an insectoid doctor. He looks like a cross between a praying mantis and a Jerusalem cricket, the way I described it. That's what he looked like. And they had some kind of apparatus on my head, kind of like headphones, but they're obviously more sophisticated. But something about it was uncomfortable for me. So I must have telepathically, because I wasn't able to speak, telling the insectoid doctor that it hurt. So then he admonished the little gray guys, and they took that apparatus off of my head. And at that point, I remember asking, and part of this is conscious memory, part of it's retrieved memories, right?
Right.
So a combination. And I asked the doctor, I said, "What's going on here?" And he said, "Well, this is special processing. We're doing special processing." And he said, "You don't need to know anything else." And at that point, he just kind of touched my forehead. And then next thing you knew, I was back in my bed. My cat came back. So that was in 1973. So that's kind of a classic scenario, I guess, if you will. I called him for years. I called him Dr. Bug. That's just all I called him. And I've talked to other people now who've met this insectoid doctor or somebody like him, and like Terry Lovelace, he's well known in the UFO community here. He was a former assistant attorney general of Vermont and also of American Samoa. And he was a prosecuting attorney, and he's this legal guy and Air Force veteran as well. And he was abducted, and he had an encounter with the insectoid doctor. But anyway, so that was 1973. 1977, it was a dual experience. I was on a road trip with my friend. I call him Ernie. And we were driving from Seattle through to Salt Lake City, and then to Las Vegas, and then to Los Angeles, and then back up the coast. That was our road trip. We were 18 years old. We were just on this crazy road trip. So we got a late start. We got to Idaho, and it was getting dark, and we had a near head-on collision. So we realized, oh my gosh, we got to pull over and get some sleep. Well, we didn't have enough money for a hotel. We didn't bargain or we didn't really plan too well our trip money-wise. So we said, we don't really want to spend a hotel, so we'll find a campground. So we drove off the road at this place called Black Pine Peak, which sounds kind of mysterious already. Black Pine Peak in Idaho, the wilderness of Idaho. So we pull off on this dirt road. We keep going. We never find the campground. Finally, there's this clearing, and we just pull off to the side of the dirt road. And we're too tired to put up a tent. It's too dark. So we just put our sleeping bags over us as we recline the seats and try to fall asleep. Next thing you know, and this is conscious memories and retrieved. And also I talked to Ernie about it too, about what he remembers. So it's a combination of those things. So I remember we were trying to sleep. And then at a certain point we saw lights, but the lights were coming from odd directions. At first I thought there was another car that pulled up, but the lights were too high and they were pointing in odd directions. And then there was people around the car. But the weird thing was, and this is conscious memory, I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything about it. And I remember the weird smell and some weird sounds. So those are the things I consciously remember. When I was going to write the story, I did a hypnotic regression and found out the whole story. But after I did that, I called my friend Ernie, and I hadn't talked to him in a couple of years, but I said, Ernie, what do you remember about that trip and about that camp where we stayed overnight? And he told me the same thing, the weird lights. It was like there's people outside, and that he felt like he couldn't move. And I, during the regression, she had me, this is Yvonne Smith, a very famous hypnotic regressionist here in Southern California. She asked me, okay, you're back in that car. What do you see? So I described, obviously there were non-human entities around there, and there was a craft out there, and that's why the lights were in a weird, coming from above rather than like a car. And then she said, turn your head and tell me, what is your friend Ernie doing? So in my subconscious, I turned my head, and I said, Ernie's gone. And that's when I realized that Ernie had been abducted. I wasn't abducted, but he was. Oh, wow. So when I talked to Ernie about this, after he corroborated all the conscious memories I had, I told him, you know what, Ernie, I think you were abducted. And oh my gosh, he was so mad at me when I told him that. He said, if you would have told me that, from the beginning, instead of, this kind of sneaky way that you started talking about it, I would have refused to talk to you. I don't want to talk about that. And I think it's really terrible that you're, and if you're going to write this story, you can't, because that's not his real name. He said, you can't use my name. And he was just, really, really mad. And I said, I'm really sorry. I feel bad. And so he hung up. I kept trying to contact him, email him. And finally he emailed me back and he said, he said, I do remember something. He said, and the reason you feel bad is because you let your best friend get abducted. That's what he said in the email. And then he said, I do remember feeling paralyzed, and that these alien entities told me, this one is quite a squealer. You think he'd never seen a set of pincers before. Pincers,
Yeah.
And so he said, the reason you feel bad is because you let me be abducted, and I don't want my name to be used. And then I thought, well, we're going to talk about it together. No, he said that was it. He wouldn't talk to me. I've tried. That's a couple of years ago. He just hasn't contacted me. He was left on a very angry note. So I remembered that I'd written a couple of poems after this trip. This was kind of an eventful trip, not just that. And I found an old poem that I'd written. I keep all my writing in old notebooks, and I found it. And the name of the poem was I Sold Out to the Aliens. And I read the poem, and at the end of the poem, I mentioned pincers. And my blood ran cold. I go, oh my, I don't remember writing that, but here it is from 1977, this poem I'd written on this sheet of paper. Wow. And so I included that in the book, that story. So not only did I have corroborating, story, at least part of it, and well, most of it from Ernie and myself and my hypnotic regression, but I also had this evidence, this documentary evidence, in the form of a poem, but still mentioning what he had said. And so it was, that was in 1977. And then in 1978, this is before, my Anzar or the progenitor thing in 1997. But in 1978, it was a very low point in my life. I had broken up with my girlfriend. I had lost my job. I had a job in Alaska, but I screwed up and I was sent home early. I got another job as a carpenter, but I got fired. I had no money. I was living in my brother's garage. My brother was really mad at me because I had no money and I was mooching off of him. I felt really bad. My parents were mad at me because they had the guy that hired me in Alaska was my dad's friend. And then he called my dad and got really mad at him. So I was, just broken up with my girlfriend. So I was about to kill myself. I mean, that's just what it was. I had a knife in my hand. I was ready. All of a sudden, out of the floor and connecting to the ceiling was this, like a column of fire particles just shooting up like that. And I was just stunned. I just didn't know what is going on. And there's like this rumbling like voice, like that. And I thought, whoa, this is some kind of demonic thing or what. That's what I thought, my conscious memories. I'm thinking about that. And I'm taken up into this beam, right? And I did a hypnotic regression with that too. And I had quite a bit of the details already in my conscious memories, but what I thought was a column of fire was actually like a particle beam. And I was taken out of that garage. The ceiling disappeared of this old dirty garage. And I went up into the stars. I don't remember being in a ship or anything. And I don't know if I was gone for 5 minutes or half an hour or an hour, whatever. Next thing you know, I'm back on this dirty old mattress. The knife is on the side of the mattress, but I had absolutely no feeling of wanting to hurt myself. I said, I'm not going to, why would I even think that? In fact, I put it out of my mind. I just didn't, I'm going to make it. I'm going to be okay. So I look at that as an alien contact, but as an intervention that I wasn't supposed to do that. And I understood. So yeah, that was in 1978. So those are some of the most pronounced experiences that I've had, other than my last 3 years and communicating with Anzar. So
right. So now that also makes it clearer to me why you're having this astral connection with Anzar. Yeah, now I understand. I totally get it, because I couldn't marry the two. Why, like he was telling you that you must be love, you must, like my favorite star person always said to me, and I think I told you this in our pre-meeting, the most profound words he said to me that I've tried to live with, and that was, Miriam, when you do anything, you must do it from your heart. When you speak from your heart. When you act from your heart. And just there was such a correspondence with what Anzar says to you and what my star people told me, that I was really having difficulty marrying the two, to be honest. And I'm always honest. But now I completely understand after talking to you like this. I completely see why. Like, our paths are different. We've taken different journeys. I've never seen insectoid or aliens, star people, not consciously anyway. I've certainly seen reptilians. I have seen greys, but I've never been abducted. I've been an experiencer, and my first experience was, my first conscious memory of seeing beings was when I was 3. So I've had, but unlike you, I've been on ships. I don't know how many times I've been on ships, but I saw myself in, like, for want of better terms, a classroom situation where they were teaching me from my childhood up. They've been teaching me things and preparing me to do the work that we're doing pretty much, which is educating people and getting people to question. We're both doing the same work, but we're coming from a different angle, which is really cool. Really cool.
Well, no, I think so. I think that's exactly what you're doing, and that's the mission that I'm on. And Anzar, he tells me that this is, that part of it is this leap of consciousness, not a leap of faith, but a leap of consciousness. And he calls it into an era of reconversion, which I needed to ask him more questions. I said, no, I kind of understand what you mean, reconversion, but can you explain it? And the way it's explained to me is that ancient people had the connection to the stars, to the earth, to the entities, to the spirits in a very comfortable, natural way. We have come, into this modern technological society, and except for some people that have experiences like yourself, like me, like some others, everybody else seems to have hidden that part of themselves. It's pushed down from a very early age. If I didn't have a psychic mom, I would have had those experiences beaten out of me, because I was told, don't talk about these things in school, because I talk about my my invisible friends that were with me and all this stuff. Oh, that's you can't. You're in school now. You can't talk about it. That's childish stuff. And so I was. My mom she taught me pretty early on that you only talk to certain people about it. You can't talk to everybody about these things. And we would read each other's minds with cards and do telepathy and stuff. So she was very, very good about that. So she helped me a lot. She wasn't a practicing psychic. She was just a natural psychic. And her mom was a healer, an herbalist and a healer in that remote village in that remote island in northern Norway. So because they didn't have hospitals or doctors on that island. So they relied on folk medicine and stuff.
Sounds very much like the Appalachian people.
And yeah, they're farmers and fishermen. So if it wasn't for World War II, I would be a farmer or a fisherman in northern Norway, more than likely. World War II, the consequences of that got my parents to immigrate to the United States. So, but so that's, I don't know where I started with that, but that's where I ended up. So that's okay.
No, that's really cool. That's and I was going to say about your mum and your gran. Very often, star people follow families through generations for people like us to come in. So when we come in, then they can, like, they follow the family genetics for a reason. It's a very, very common thing. So it's not surprising that you had encounters earlier in your life, and it's not surprising that it's ongoing now. And quite often, but not always, it comes through the female line. In my family, it actually came through both. My father had experiences, and my mother did as well. So And that's not uncommon either.
You got the double whammy.
Yeah, got the double whammy. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad was very practical, fisherman,
I was just going
carpenter.
to say, yeah.
He didn't like my mom and I reading, cards and telepathy. He'd let us do it for a while for like entertainment purposes. And then as soon as we got too many hits in a row, he'd get freaked out and he'd say, that's it. And had to put the cards away. My mom would wink at me though. So I knew that we're respecting dad's boundaries, but we know what's going on.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that makes a big difference, having a support like that when you're growing up. It makes a huge difference. My personal knowing from what my star people have taught me aligns a lot with what Anzar has been telling you about the coming earth changes and tumultuous times that are happening on this planet. However, I come with a bit of a different understanding to you about the behind the scenes stuff. I did when COVID was first released, I put out a podcast episode, just a bonus episode, 20 minutes, and it's called The End Game, and it's my knowing about what's going on, which comes from a totally different angle to yours. I talk about the social manipulation that the current governments, all the governments are doing. And I hate social engineering, because this reality is so controlled. Oh, I know what I was going to say before we finished, Bruce. Years ago, when you're talking about Anzar saying, people were going to come to a different, years ago, in 1985, in fact, last time I spoke with my star people, they said to me, Marianne, currently, I said, what's happening with the earth changes? And they said to me back in the 80s, currently the earth's been held in position so she doesn't move so she doesn't move. They did this, like she's been held by like a baby, cradled in position. He said, there have to be a certain number of souls who are at a level of spiritual understanding before the earth changes can begin in earnest, because people have to have the opportunity to grow and to... Anyway, that point was reached about 3 years ago. I felt the energetic shift when it happened. I felt it, physically felt it. And since then, in fact, as soon as it happened, as soon as I felt it, I wrote a post in my group saying, this has just happened. This energy shift has just happened. Now watch from now on, this will happen and this will happen. And you'll see a polarization of people. You'll see more people standing up and speaking out about injustices. And then the Me Too movement came, and then all this came, and then the COVID thing came, and I put out this podcast saying, don't buy into the fear, because they use fear as a means of controlling you, so you won't question what's going on. It's that David Icke. Have you heard of David Icke? It's his saying, problem, reaction, solution. Create a problem, and I have no doubt COVID is genuine. How it got into the public situation, however, is so they create the problem, and people jump up and say, oh my God, save us, what are we going to do? Reaction. Oh, here's the solution. Let's take away your rights. Let's take away your freedoms. Let's inject you.
Yeah.
Let's do this,
Without, and then people, going back to what you said at the beginning, and then people are doing things without questioning it. Without thinking about it, without thinking it through. They're just reacting, gut reaction from fear.
Gut reaction from fear.
Yeah.
And it's deliberate. And so I always say to people, don't fear. That's what they want you to do. People who are scared are easy to control. People who are scared, it's very easy for them to give up their rights because they think that they'll be protected, but they'll never get those rights back. Like here in New Zealand, when COVID first came out, and we had one case in New Zealand in the community, we shut down for 2 weeks. During that period of time, the government rushed through a law saying that the police could enter our homes without warrants. Draconian measures being introduced to control the population. But that's kind of like a whole nother story.
No, that's Anzar told me that in January of 2020, he told me that COVID originated in a lab in Wuhan, in a weapons lab, and that it was likely, he said likely it was accidental, but it was from a weapons lab. So it wasn't whatever the wet market story. And I happened, when that was all going on, I had a Chinese exchange student from mainland China, but she was moving to the United States. I think she got married or something, and she was from that area. And she said, that story is ridiculous. That's, Anzar told me this. And then I had a student tell me in my class, she just came up to me and said, the story's not true. We don't eat bats. And that it didn't come from a wet market. There's a weapons lab right there. And I didn't tell her that, Anzar told me that too, but that was a lady that lived in that area from China. And she told me that. So and then, the more dubious connections are even that we might have known about the weaponization and we might have even financed it. So that, there's some nasty connections that are not just, from one source, there's not just one boogeyman, there's many boogeymen.
Indeed. In fact, my instinctual knowing was that China was being the fall guy, but actually they weren't entirely to blame.
Anzar told me that it was likely an accident, but they did weaponize it. They did I forgot what the terminology is. Something production for use or something. I forgot what they call that terminology, but they had made it, it was a hybrid from the original, virus, and they had made it worse. I just call it weaponization, but there's some technical medical term.
Yeah.
So, I think the truth will eventually come out, but who knows what's going to happen between now and then. And meanwhile, once you give up certain individual rights, it's very, very difficult to get them back. And it's been, throughout history, usually happens during wartime. And that's why they like to use war terminology. We're at war against the virus, because then they can institute, like you said, draconian measures, and people don't question it because they are so afraid. Oh, yes, it's a war. And, there's a two-step process to losing your freedom. The first step is loss of privacy. The second step is your actual physical freedom you lose. But you lose your privacy. And we have a right to privacy, and we have a right to individual freedom. And that it seems to follow that pattern. And it's very scary. It is. And it's like Anzar always tells me, try to remain cool and calm and logical and help people to understand. And as we go through, this, as he called it, the series of calamities, trials and tribulations that we're going to have.
Yes. And as I said in my Endgame podcast, for the bonus episode, I said, it's going to be a wild ride. We're in for a ride, but we're all in it together. So, that's the thing. There's no one that's not going to be affected in one way or another.
Yeah. And we, one of my favorite, when I was growing up, my dad used to tell me the story of the Kon-Tiki. The Norwegian explorer Thor Heyerdahl, who got on a raft, a balsa wood raft, along with some other guys of different nationalities, and they floated to Polynesia. And I think it was 1,100 miles and so many days, I forgot. But his concept was that we're all really living on a raft, and we need each other to survive. We can't afford to be fighting and arguing and blaming each other. He said, when we were on that raft, we put aside all of our differences and we focused on one thing, and that was survival. And we got that raft and us to that remote island in Polynesia. And I really believe that. And having studied American wars and talked to thousands of veterans, combat veterans, that's one thing they all say is that when you're under fire, nothing else matters other than the person next to you, and you don't care what color his skin is or what their religion is. They have your back. You are brothers or sisters, as the case may be. Women in combat too, and you put aside all your differences, and all of that goes away, and you have that focus on survival. And it could be that these trials and tribulations and calamities bring us to a point where we can't afford to be arguing and fighting. We need to all pull together at the same time to make it across the ocean or in the raft, that shaky old raft.
Yeah, very possibly.
Yeah.
But when Anzar talked about a coming civil war, and I can see why the people who stand, like you mentioned earlier, and this is going to be controversial for my listeners, but you mentioned earlier about people, vaccinations being compulsory for people to be able to go to university. That's taking away people's rights. People have a right to choose.
We were just talking about that today in my faculty meeting, and I came up with a very easy solution. I said, those that want to be, to go along with that and teach on campus, go ahead. Those that don't, for religious reasons, personal reasons, whatever, they don't want to, they can teach online. We've already proven we can teach online successfully. So just remain home and teach online. And the students too, if they do, they probably make it mandatory for students too. So if you don't want to go get the mandatory or the vaccination, then stay home, take your online classes. And it's a proven modality. So there's an easy, elegant solution. I mean, not elegant, but it's an easy solution to avoid that. But it probably is not going to go down that easy.
No. And making it mandatory takes away a person's freedom of choice, which is a control. And nobody has the right to tell another person what they can do or not do with their own body, whether you're pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine. It's the same principle. And
it comes back to the right of privacy too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. So can your employer say, I need to know if you've been vaccinated or not? Well, that's a medical record. And there are laws about protecting your medical information. But apparently there's some loophole that is developed in what we call the HIPAA law here, where they can legally ask you, but you legally don't have to tell them. But they can legally ask you. And then, of course, they can make up all kinds of repercussions should you not give them the confirmation. So it's going to be a sticky wicket, sticky situation.
It's a very, very slippery slope. I actually was watching a video this morning of a guy in England who was unvaccinated, and he tried to get into this pub, and they wouldn't let him into the pub to have a drink unless he could prove that he'd been vaccinated. And that's happening already in England. So it's a very dangerous, slippery slope. But the side is that more and more people are waking up to what's happening, and they're starting to protest about it.
Yeah.
And then, but they're using this divisive tactic. So those who've had the vaccine are very, for the most part, rabidly vaccine. You have to have the vaccine. If you don't, you're stupid. You're a danger to other people. It's a divide and conquer tactic, and it's been deliberately, what's the word? Encouraged.
Yeah, I think that there's so many ways that I can speak for America, for being an American historian, but our country is being divided along so many different lines, whether it's pro-vax, anti-vax, pro-life, pro-choice. The Black Lives Matter versus, people who, the whatever people think, it's divided along lines of race and gender and sexuality and everything else. I mean, it's like, well, wait a second. Can't we all just, accept each other and realize there are differences and then there's similarities and we can all get along and we don't have to get into these warring camps, and batten down the hatches and get ready for combat here. This is, we're pretty clever at compromise when we get down to it, but we gotta, as an old saying in Westerns is, you gotta sober up and put your pistol away,
Right. But you know what it boils down to? What it is it's fear. It's just fear.
Yeah.
And humans have been genetically created with a fear button that's easily triggered.
Yeah.
Because you can control through fear. So where do you think you're going from here? What do you see in your near future?
I'm going to continue to write. I'm working on 2 comic books right now. I really love comic books, and I didn't really talk that much about them, but my main character, Snark, is an alien human hybrid. So a lot of my personal experiences I've fictionalized and put into my comic book characters. And there's a spin-off comic called Dr. Jekyll, Alien Hunter, also an alien theme. And the main character is a middle-aged woman, a female professor. And because I thought all these in comic books, they always hypersexualize women,
Yeah,
And I
they
thought
do.
I just want a regular woman who's a professional lady who's studying, she studies ancient aliens and she has all these adventures. And so I wanted to have that something that young women could pick up or any age person, male or female, and say, oh, there's a different face, there's a different look, there's a different scenario there. And so that was, and I have a daughter that's 25, and she helps me understand changes in society. She's very good about
she
that.
Does.
She's very good about helping me understand all that, and my wife too. But anyway, so I got those comic books. So that's what immediately in the next couple of years. I don't know if I'll do any more paranormal books, but paranormal stuff keeps happening. So I'm sure that'll probably. In what form it comes, I don't know. I'm going to be on a couple of TV shows, which is kind of interesting. It just kind of, you're out there, and people all of a sudden say, hey, we would like to talk to you. And so like, I'm going to go film next week for some show. And then I've already been filmed for a show that comes out in the fall. And so all these people with a lot of money now are all of a sudden interested. They don't think people who've had alien or paranormal experiences are nuts anymore. They think they're a way to make money, right? That's what they're not approaching it from you and I from a spiritual sense, but from, oh, we can make some money off this. So, but one way or the other, you get your message out there. So,
exactly. And even if it just causes somebody to question, that's a good thing, because that's a seed planted, and who knows what will come of that. Yeah, so that's really cool. Now, how can people contact you, Bruce?
Well, if they go to my website, bruceolavsolheim.com, all my contact information is there, my email and everything. And all my books are on there. All the projects I'm working on are all contained on that one website. And so that's how you can stay up to date with what I'm doing. And I enjoy when people write me. Oftentimes I'm on podcasts and people will write me and tell me, hey, this happened and what do you think? And so I try to answer the best I can. And so I always enjoy when people contact me. And I really enjoyed being on your podcast and talking to you. And I enjoyed our when we talked earlier too. So I knew that we would hit it off well. And you had some really good questions about the book. And I appreciate that. You really got into it. So.
It's a good book. It is a good read. It's a long read, 400 pages, but it's very interesting. And, it's really brave of you to put that out there, especially since there's been a lot of questionable material.
Yes. In the UFO community, especially.
Yeah.
There are so many charlatans. Well, there are in the paranormal community in general, but but if you follow your heart, like you said, and you keep, love in your heart and operate from a position of love, you can kind of see through that when you go, somebody's genuinely, I remember once somebody said something about one of my books and they said, oh, this guy's just making a fortune off these books. And I'm thinking, buddy, you don't even know.
Publishing.
I've spent more on editing than I've ever made on books. So that's not the purpose. If that was the purpose, I would be an extreme failure at what I'm doing. So that's not, and whenever I'm on one of these shows, it's like, the only people that get paid in entertainment are the stars, right? Everybody else is you get like $100 or something. That's it.
Or we do it for love.
Or you do it for nothing. Yeah, that's exactly right. Maybe they'll give you a sandwich. That's about it. And that's cool with me. I'm not expecting anything more than that, so that's fine. I'm going to do what I do no matter what. So
exactly. Are you on social media, Bruce? Are you on Instagram or TikTok or?
No, just Facebook.
Just
so
Facebook.
You can find me, just my name on Facebook. I'm there, and yeah, so that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Just my website and Facebook, and all my books are on Amazon as well, and I think other booksellers, online booksellers too.
Right.
But the best way is just go to my website, and then you can see all the different things that I'm up to: comic books, music, all the interests, all my plays, all
Oh,
the things.
brilliant. Well, there will be on the Walking the Shadowlands website, which is www.walkingtheshadowlands.com. Every episode, I have a page for each episode, and
Mm-hmm.
on that episode, there's a full written transcript, like the one that you
Oh,
always leave, and with links. So people
nice.
can either go to your website or they can go to this episode's page on the Walking the Shadowlands website. That will take them to your website if they can't remember the name. So either way, they can contact you that way. So that's really cool. Bruce, look, thank you so much for your time. It's been a really interesting conversation.
Thank you, Marianne. I appreciate it. That was fun.
I want to thank Bruce for talking with us all today and sharing his experiences and viewpoint. I really enjoy my guests, and I know I mention this so often. Apart from the fact that our podcast wouldn't be the same without them, I find that with each guest I've learned so much. I never tire of learning, searching, and most importantly, questioning. Whether or not I agree entirely with each guest or their viewpoint, isn't that a wonderful thing about learning? It just never stops. That is, if you're open to new growth potential, even if it's just in recognizing how you react to a certain trigger and why. I hope you all enjoyed our conversation as well. Perhaps it may even have planted a seed for you, a desire to search out a new understanding or learning, or that you were simply entertained. It's all good either way. Thank you for joining Bruce and I today and listening to this episode. I certainly appreciate it, and you. If you enjoyed this podcast and have considered becoming a sponsor, now's a great time to join. Just head over to patreon.com/MCC15 and sign up now. As a patron, you get early access to the podcast episodes and a special members-only page on the podcast website that has bits that end up on the digital cutting board. And little extras like full, raw, unedited video, warts and all conversations with guests, EVPs caught during the conversations, and so much more. Also, you can download full written transcripts of each episode, and you get my absolute appreciation and gratitude. Patreon.com/MCC15. For just the cost of a cup of coffee a month, you can help support me with the running costs of producing and editing and hosting this podcast. Today's bumper music was called Space Force Theme by Orchestralis. So you don't miss out on an episode, make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. This podcast is available on all free podcasting platforms, including iHeartRadio and Pandora as well. Also, if you have Alexa, simply say these 4 words, "Open Walking the Shadowlands," and Alexa will play our latest episode for you. Check out our Facebook page, Walking the Shadowlands, our Instagram feed of the same name, our Twitter feed, at Shadowlands10, TikTok under walking_the_Shadowlands. Like and follow for teasers of our upcoming episodes. Also check out our website, www.walkingtheshadowlands.com. If you don't have a smartphone, then you can listen to the episodes from the podcast website, www.walkingtheshadowlands.com. For those hearing impaired, there's a full written transcript of each episode on the website, so you don't miss out at all. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your workmates about our show. Encourage them to listen and to subscribe also. The more, the merrier. Thanks for listening to this episode. Ka kite ano, oia koe. I'll see you again.
Thanks for listening.